Hi, everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connerton with, as always, the Honorable Gary S. Hopper. And he brought notes.
And I brought notes.
Yes. You are well prepared, sir.
No, I'm not.
Oh.
I
was giving you the benefit of the doubt.
No, I'm still pissed.
Oh. You are?
Yeah, well...
What's the matter?
Well, about a month or so ago, I don't know when it was, some jerk... This is why I don't agree with free enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
This is why it should be state-run. Because... No, I'm sure Frank's totally in agreement with this.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
All your Republican colleagues are. I have
because
no doubt.
No, this is important because 2 doors down on Elm Street was a Dunkin' Donuts,
Yes.
and they replaced it with some chocolate thing.
Right. Yeah, like a dessert
They
shop.
didn't get my frickin' permission for that.
Right.
They didn't say, "Hey, Gary," they didn't think of the fact that I had to stop in Goffstown to get my iced tea before I did the show.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is about me.
Yes.
And I'm just still a little upset, but I got my Monty Python T-shirt on, so that helps.
Oh, yeah. It's a little faded. I wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah, it's only 10 years old.
Yeah. Been through the wash a few times. But you were able to get your coffee, or whatever it is that you're drinking.
Iced tea.
Iced tea. Oh,
Iced
good.
tea.
Very good.
They had it for like $1.08 the other day. Now I don't
Really?
know. It's back up to $2. I don't know what happened.
Oh, they must have been.
It's free enterprise screwing around.
I know.
That's what I
I
hate.
know.
I hate that.
It drags us all down.
The government should just give us iced tea. Right, Frank?
Let them drink tea.
Let them drink tea.
I'm
Exactly.
sure somewhere in Washington there's a tea lobbyist who's probably working on that right now.
I would hope.
Yes.
I would hope.
Yes.
That's important stuff. The other thing that aggravated me today, or confused me today, because I'm easily confused, is I was driving along and on a big billboard it said "Space for Sale,"
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, how do you manage that? Like, could you buy the space around Mars so that when one of the explorers goes through, they have to pay you a toll?
It's a good idea.
And how much does it cost? I mean, is it like per acre? Is it per light year? Or what, I don't even know. But they got a big sign, "Space for Sale," and I'm thinking, wow, that's confusing.
I'm sure Romney already owns some of it.
Oh, yeah. Him and, what's the Democrat guy there that's, who's the Greek guy?
Oh, Soros.
George
Soros, yes.
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 He probably owns the entire Milky Way.
Yes.
Already.
Somebody's got to.
Jerk. Anyway.
You can buy property on the moon, can't you? Can't you actually buy?
I already bought 5 stars.
Did you? Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because I figure if I own the stars, that way, if there's any planets around them,
Yeah.
and there's any life on it, I own actually, because I could just shut the star off, I would think. If it's mine,
Right.
I could just shut it off, and they all die, so I can, get, once we get, they pay me rent,
Yeah.
energy.
Right. So you're like, instead of a slumlord, you're like a star lord.
The Star Lord.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes. Well, good.
Matt, you're a genius.
Oh, thank you.
Almost like me.
Yes, almost.
Almost.
I aspire to that. Yes.
Oh.
This is how it goes every week, by the way,
Yes,
if you're wondering.
it gets worse. Frank Sazzo is running for sheriff. He is our guest tonight.
Oh,
And I didn't do the name right this time. No, try again.
Zabo.
Zabo. How do you spell that?
SZABO.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Zabo.
Yeah.
What is a sabbat? A sabbat pronounced in French. Isn't that Zabo also?
I don't know.
Sabbat, like the one that goes around a bullet to reduce the diameter, so you can use a smaller diameter bullet in a larger caliber weapon, like.
I'm not sure.
Hey, you want to be sheriff and you don't know that? Oh,
You don't know
boy.
that. How can you possibly be qualified?
He's got to know his ballistics.
Actually, I've been told that I'm not qualified because I don't have a big enough belly to be sheriff.
Ah,
so I could be
yes.
sheriff.
You can be sheriff. Maybe you should be the sheriff.
Which reminded me of the belly thing. I put on Facebook today because, I mentioned that because I heard somebody saying they were going to go out on a limb, and I was thinking, I really should shed a few pounds before I go out on a limb.
Mm-hmm.
People who go out on limbs and weigh over 200 pounds, I'm not sure that's safe.
Right.
Depends on how strong the tree is.
Yeah, I suppose, but it just seems not wise. I mean, a toddler should go out on a limb.
Right,
If
right.
you're going to go out on limbs, you should be like a toddler size. It's only a few pounds. You can go pretty far out. And,
Perfect weight.
Yes. Yes.
Don't try that at home, kids.
No. No.
Well, no,
I can
the,
see a lawsuit coming. Yeah.
the toddler would be
Again.
supervised, of course.
Again,
Yeah,
no.
No? You just
No.
send the toddler
No.
out and forget
If you're
about
going to
it?
go out on a limb, the whole idea is you're kind of independent and kind of taking a chance and
Okay, okay.
you know.
Yeah,
put on a clean diaper and go for it.
yeah. Yeah.
So, anyway, what were we talking about?
Diapers.
Diapers. Yes.
Diapers, yes.
Frank,
It's politics, right?
It's politics.
A lot of
Same thing. There's a lot of crap. Same thing, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you're not qualified to go run for sheriff because your belly's not big enough and you don't know about Sabbats.
Right. So interview's over.
I guess that's it.
Do you have someone else to come in? To,
I
so
don't
we
know.
can
I don't
see
know.
the
We got like
screen?
almost an hour to fill, and
Yeah.
we're already done.
Oh,
No.
oh,
So
man.
anyway, the one reason I wanted to have you and Sheriff Hardy hasn't been invited also. He hasn't gotten back to me. But anyway, because you've probably seen the show. So obviously he's smarter than you. Anyway, every 2 years people go to the polls, or a good percentage do, and vote for or against a sheriff in the Republican primary and the general election. And I am willing to bet a huge percentage of them have no clue what the sheriff does.
I would agree with you.
And so theoretically you do know the answer to that. So
I do, absolutely. That I better
hopefully.
know.
Yeah.
So anyway, why don't you explain to people what is a sheriff and what does it do currently, not what constitutionally it
Sure.
theoretically should be doing, but
Sure. Well, what most sheriffs understand to be their job
yes.
is to serve civil process, protect the courts, make sure that civil process works properly, and to transport prisoners, and to make sure that the county jail operates properly.
Okay.
And pretty much all the sheriffs do that.
Right. So the sheriff is in charge of Valley Street?
I'm not familiar with Alley Street.
Isn't it Valley Street a county?
I thought
Or is
so.
it just Goffstown?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Just
I should
the-
know. I'm a Hillsborough delegate, so actually I should know the answer to that. But I don't. Yeah. So they're in charge. They're not in charge of security at the prison, are they?
I believe so.
Okay.
They're basically in charge of the county prison
Okay.
and to make sure that it operates properly.
Okay.
And as I said, transporting prisoners as well.
Okay. And like you said, issuing summonses and things like that, and tracking down criminals occasionally too.
Yes, absolutely. They do interact with other law enforcement agencies and help the process. Again, they make sure that civil process works properly in the county.
Now, I heard on another interview that you think that the current sheriff is actually doing a reasonable job, but there's some reason you're running for office. Typically, people don't run for office like that if they
Yeah.
think the guy's doing wonderful.
Everything I've heard, Jim Hardy is doing a fine job.
He's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy. So many people tell me he's a nice guy. And again, with what I've described, again, as far as I know, he's doing a fine job. What I'm aware of is that the sheriff actually is responsible for so much more. And the bottom line is the sheriff is responsible to protect the citizens, their property, and their rights. It goes so much more beyond just the court system.
Okay.
And the sheriff is duty-bound to protect them from any unlawful activity. And it doesn't matter whether it's the federal government or a state agency. The sheriff is supposed to be protecting the citizens, and making sure that the court system works properly is part of that function.
Well, the court system is the chief justice would be in charge of the court system.
Right. Right. Yeah,
So
the sheriff's not in
that's-
charge of the system.
No,
But
right.
making sure that it's protected, and again, there's certain things that civil process has to go through the office of the sheriff, such as mortgage foreclosures,
Right.
things of that nature.
Now, I heard you talk about mortgage foreclosures. Fundamentally, what happened, and people probably know this from watching the news over the last 2 years, is the mortgage swap scandal. In effect, what happened was, years ago, when you get a mortgage, I go to the bank, and I say I need $100,000 to buy a house, and they basically keep the deed to the land, and you pay them until you pay it off. Then they give you the deed, or in later years, the bank would periodically sell those mortgages to another bank. And that would have to go through the registry of deeds, and they would transfer the deed to the other bank.
Right. Each
Okay.
time it was supposed
Each
to be
time
recorded at the
It
county.
was supposed to be recorded at the county level, and the state and the county, that's one way the county gets money to operate part of its operating budget. What happened during the fiasco of the mortgage swap arrangement was those mortgages were pooled together. So instead of my mortgage being with, St. Mary's Bank, and I don't know if St. Mary's does, that's a credit union, so let's probably not use them. Say American Express, or
Yeah.
American, what's a big, is American Express a big loan?
Bank of America?
Bank of America, thank you. Bank of America is a horrible institution, we'll use that one.
I agree.
So anyway, Bank of America, I get a loan for my property from Bank of America. They get 50 of these, and they bundle them with 50 other mortgages that they're not really too confident they're going to get actually paid back.
Right.
So
That's relevant.
so they get 200 of these, and they sell it to an offshore bank, okay? And then that gets lumped together with something else and sent to somebody else. Okay, so now the actual deed to your property has been sold and resold and resold. So the actual deed has went into like a process center,
Yeah.
and it was never registered with the Registry of Deeds.
Right.
It was sold and bought and sold and bought and sold and bought so many times that they're really not sure who actually has the deed to that property, and they didn't go through the proper channels, and they still, at the very least, owe the county money just for
Right.
re-registering those deeds. So fundamentally, you have people whose property is being foreclosed on, that there is no deed to the property, or no legal deed to the
Well,
property.
the problem you were explaining, basically, there's no clear title.
No clear
So
title.
The bank cannot prove that they have any claim to the property. And unfortunately, a lot of the court systems are ignoring that fact, and they're foreclosing anyway. And some people are having their homes foreclosed on that may not have even had a mortgage with a particular bank,
Wow.
but it's being foreclosed on.
Right.
And the sheriff absolutely has authority to block that kind of nonsense.
That's
And that is one thing that the sheriff is supposed to be doing.
this is kind of where we get into a difficult situation, because there's like what you said, I agree with that, but unfortunately the banks have had a lot to do with how our RSAs are written. Our revised standard, our laws in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Revised I
The
can't remember,
statutes.
statutes.
Annotated statutes.
And thank you. And so I looked that up today, because now I can't even see. So Title 7, 10421 liability. Basically, if you're a sheriff and you choose not to foreclose on a property, even though there's not a clear title, the lien owner can actually charge the sheriff's department interest, 5 times in interest. So your department is very possibly going to be liable for the money.
Wow.
So I understand. I told him before the show that I was involved in trying to take Suter's house. And the one thing I know is, because I think it's commendable what you want to do. Okay, I agree with it in principle. But fundamentally, the National Propaganda Radio and the AP and all those, they're all in bed together.
Sure.
And if Chase Manhattan tries to foreclose on Mon Pa Kettle's property, and you're the sheriff and you say, "No, I don't think so, you don't get a clear, show me the title and I'll do it,"
Right.
they're going to make you look like a nutcase.
And they're going to try everything they can.
Right, but that's how they do it.
Oh, sure. No, I
Oh, yeah.
understand.
The
I
first
understand.
order of business is to
Right.
make whoever is standing in the way of the system, so to speak,
Right.
look like they're insane.
Right. Well, let me just explain something. Just a real quick history lesson. The Office of the Sheriff actually is a very ancient position. Goes all the way back to the year 900 in England. And the sheriff was always supposed to be protecting the rights and the property of the sovereign. Everybody knows the story of Robin Hood. Well, the sheriff was the bad guy because the Prince John, basically acting in the name of the king,
Yeah.
was telling him what to do. Fast forward, colonists come over to North America. Sheriff comes with them, again, still to protect the rights and the property of King George. After the Revolution, everything gets turned upside down. The citizens become the sovereigns. We became sovereign citizens after the Revolution. The
Right.
sheriff remained, but now to protect the rights and the property of the citizens.
Yes.
Because of that, the office of the sheriff actually predates the Constitution, and it's based in common law, which is basically common sense. So the RSA may say a certain thing.
Do you really think it's appropriate to put common sense in,
Yeah,
in the same in politics?
Yes, I do. It is
I don't know. I don't think that's going to work. I can't see that ever happening.
He's a very strange man.
Yeah, he is.
Strange
Yes.
ideas.
Yes.
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 Oh,
So,
I'm
no,
sure
I'm
there's
sorry,
a few
sorry,
that
go
are
ahead,
doing
go
that. Yeah.
So,
But bottom line is the office of the sheriff has authorities that run outside of any RSAs. And
Okay.
some of the documentation that I talk about specifically states that the sheriff is responsible to make sure that the citizens are protected, their property, their rights, and the legislatures specifically cannot reduce the authority of the sheriff.
okay.
So these RSAs.
Now, would you base on that on?
There's one particular document called Anderson on Sheriffs. It was from the 40s,
Yep.
and it was written by a prominent attorney of the day that practiced before the Supreme Court of the United States.
Right.
And it basically is a manual that was put together and has lots of references in court
Because
cases
a
and
sheriff
sightings.
in Texas is completely different than a sheriff in New Hampshire.
No, it's not.
No.
It's the same office. Doesn't matter. Now, again, some sheriffs are exercising their authority more than others.
Right.
Again, unfortunately, the majority of sheriffs only believe that they're there to take care of the court system.
Right. Or, yeah, to do what, basically, they're almost,
Civil process.
yes.
Right. And again, the documentation proves otherwise in historical cases. But this document, Anderson on Sheriffs, it's actually a treatise on the law of sheriffs, coroners, and constables.
Now, has that been appealed to the Supreme Court? Now, I understand, as limited understanding as I have of the Constitution, that allowing the United States Supreme Court to be the final arbiters of what is right and wrong is always a mistake.
Yes. And-
However,
Yes.
has there been a case where a sheriff went outside his, what, say, the governor or local politicians felt were reasonable,
Right.
and been taken to court, and then gone to the Supreme Court to challenge that status quo? Because right now there's a sheriff. It's in our state constitution, and its limitations are pretty well, not completely, but are the limitations on sheriff are written in the RSAs.
I haven't seen them.
Okay, but well, I just explained one of them.
Well,
But so what I'm getting at is, what foundation are you going to use to be able to challenge things and win?
right.
Because challenging is one thing, but winning is
Absolutely. And again, this particular treatise that I talk about spells it out, has all the court cases that can be, if need be, to back things up.
Yep.
But there is one of the more recent court cases before the U.S. Supreme Court was Sheriff Richard Mack, originally from Graham County, Arizona.
I think I've heard the name. Yeah.
Yeah, and he basically, with another sheriff, fought the Brady Bill during the Clinton administration.
Okay.
And one of the aspects of the Brady Bill was telling local sheriffs and law enforcement that they would have to enforce certain aspects of gun control within that bill.
Okay.
And Sheriff Mack and actually 7 other sheriffs realized that just didn't make sense, that the federal government is telling them what to do. End result is 2 sheriffs, Sheriff Mack and Sheriff Prince, went all the way to the Supreme Court, fought it, and the Supreme Court, luckily, that Supreme Court decided that the federal government doesn't have authority to tell state officials, specifically sheriffs, what to do.
Right.
And
Okay.
the sheriff has the authority to block something that they believe is unconstitutional.
Okay.
So that court case specifically substantiates what I talk about from previous documentation.
Is that also based on somewhat of state sovereignty? It's not necessarily just the office of sheriff.
I mean, basically, it's a perfect case for state sovereignty.
Right.
Absolutely. But again, it was specifically around the fact that the federal government, which was already told from a previous court case before the Supreme Court, that the federal government cannot direct states as to what to do.
Okay.
They basically tried doing a runaround and not telling states directly, but directing the officials, the state officials. So this court case was trying to more specifically address the fact that the federal government cannot direct public officials at a state level,
Now,
one way or another.
in the case of the mortgage thing, like I say, I tend to agree with you. Based on the information I have now, I tend to agree.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to? And obviously, you're pro Second Amendment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I'd like to expand on that a little bit more.
go ahead. No,
Well,
go
no,
ahead.
it was just people talk about Second Amendment rights, and I actually just put out an article about a week or so ago, and the title of it is "No Such Thing as Constitutional Rights." The Constitution is a document that limits government. It's a creation document that created the government. It does not limit citizens or their rights. So to say that I have Second Amendment rights is sort of a misnomer. You have rights guaranteed by the Constitution.
Yeah, delineated, but it shouldn't be not limited to. But
It's right. It's not a complete list.
correct.
And the specifically the right to protect yourself was felt that it was so important that it had to be marked down specifically in the Constitution. But again, it's meant to bar the government from attacking that right.
Right. Well, a lot of people might not know is we didn't even have a Second Amendment in the New Hampshire Constitution.
Okay.
That was written in the 80s by, I think, the legislator that introduced it was Crow Dickinson. And he introduced it because it was starting at that wave when there was all this anti-gun stuff, and realized we have a 10th Amendment to the New Hampshire Constitution, which trumps that.
Okay.
I don't know, are you familiar with that?
No, actually, I'm not sure what you're referring to because I actually have a copy of the Constitution. Right?
Yeah, go, look at the
And just,
10th. The 10th, to me,
Well, just Article 2 specifically talks about
right to bear arms. Right.
the
that-
right to bear arms.
Oh.
So, I mean, that's...
Yes, but that was written in 1985 or 4 or something like that. It should
Okay,
say
well, 82. Yeah,
82.
yeah,
So
again.
does Article 2, does that, of the state constitution, is that similar to the
Yeah,
federal? I mean,
kind-
is the wording
Well,
similar and whatnot?
Article
Or?
2 basically talks about natural rights. Again, your unalienable rights that
Okay.
the government's supposed to stay away from.
Okay,
And-
like the right to defend yourself would be,
Right.
okay.
Right, and Article 2A basically spells out the bearing of arms as part of that.
Okay,
It's listed as 2A, so it's a subsection of that.
okay,
So it's specifically talking about that you have a right to protect your life and your property,
right.
however you decide to do that.
right.
And 2A basically was added then to,
Yeah, the firearm
clear.
part. But look
Okay.
at 10. Look at 10. You'll love 10. If you haven't seen 10,
I'm curious.
you
now,
haven't
yeah.
lived.
right of revolution.
Right of
Oh, yeah,
revolution.
yeah, that's great. And
I mean, right in there, they're saying. In
Absolutely.
fact, in our New Hampshire Constitution, it says if you do not revolt,
You're not doing your
you
duty.
are not doing your duty as a citizen.
Absolutely.
When the government gets too far out of hand and too crazy and too oppressive, if you do not revolt, you are not doing your duty as a citizen.
Right.
So to me, that trumps the second because it's already telling you you have a right to revolt. And I went into
It's kind of hard to revolt unless you have guns.
exactly. I went in. Martha Fuller Clark was running for. No, I'm sorry. She wasn't running for. She was just a state legislator my freshman year, and she had a bill in to make. It was a copy of the Massachusetts anti-gun bill. And to her credit, she stood there for for at least 2 hours of this throttling she got from the citizens of New Hampshire. And but I got up and everybody had gotten up and talked about the Second Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Second Amendment. So I got up and talked about the 10th Amendment, and said, so if we don't have, if they take away all the guns, and we have the right to revolt, were we going to, come up here and strangle politicians with our underwear and call it a Boxer rebellion?
Right.
But yeah, yeah, exactly. But anyway, so along those lines, though, and I presume you have kind of in the Republican Party, you kind of have a libertarian kind of leaning. Is that?
Small
Is that? Yeah.
Small L.
Okay.
Well, and that's the
Now-
founding fathers were libertarian. They believed in liberty, property rights.
I'm not. I don't think. Anyway, we can argue about that some other time. If you're willing to buck the system as far as the mortgages or the Second Amendment, obviously it typically isn't an issue in New Hampshire.
Right.
Well, actually, it could be as far as you have like Goffstown. We have the Fish and Game Club in Goffstown. It's actually in Ware, but it's a Goffstown Fish and Game. You might be asked to serve notice or something like that to shut down a range or two, because like the one in.
Oh, I remember you talking about this before.
Yeah, I had legislation in to protect them. I was part of a group that did. I'm not going to take credit for it, but I'm not a very good politician. I'm supposed to take credit for everything.
Yeah, if you can get away with it, I mean, just take
nobody
it.
here to argue with me. so-
Exactly.
So anyway, a bunch of us got legislation through to protect a gun range. I think it's the Nashua Fish and Game in Brookline, because they knew Nashua was getting too populated, so they bought a bunch of land in Brookline, and Hollis or Brookline? Yeah, Brookline. I'm probably wrong. Anyway, yeah, I think it's Hollis. It's Hollis, and yeah, they bought a bunch of land there to build a shooting range.
Okay.
Then all these scumdog jerks move in next door
Right. I
and
think
start
I heard
complaining about the noise and the noise this, and they sued them, and they sued them, and they get too damn much money and not enough gray matter, and they just keep suing them, and they've been closed a lot.
Wow.
And so we filed legislation to protect them so that they couldn't be sued for, I think, for noise or something like that. So now they're going after them for lead poisoning. Okay, and things like that. Chemical,
Right.
trying to get the EPA involved and all this other stuff.
Right.
And so how are you going to deal with that as a sheriff if you have any say in it?
Well, specifically, I'm glad you brought up the EPA. One of the things I talk about in my presentation is the fact that, again, the sheriff is the CEO of the county, the chief law enforcement officer, and is responsible and authorized to ensure that anything that happens in the county is lawful. Not necessarily legal, lawful.
Right.
And big difference, I talk about that. It used to be legal to own slaves, but it was never lawful.
No, we covered the quite a bit. We covered, and one of the cool things we actually got through the legislature this year was the jury nullification.
Right.
So it's the same kind of thing.
Along the same lines. But the federal government was never supposed to have direct access to or interaction with the citizens. And the EPA is a perfect example. They're coming in, and you talk about Agenda 21. The EPA comes in and throws all these regulations at you. The sheriff has the authority to block all that nonsense.
Wow.
Absolutely. And one of the things I talk about is day one in office, I will send notice to every single federal agency. You will not come into the county unless you go through the office of the sheriff. And if I determine that what you're trying to do is unlawful or unconstitutional, I will block it, and it will not happen.
Now, aren't you going to start there's a point at which you're going to start stepping on the toes of the state police?
Very possibly. But if they're not preventing something from unlawful occurring, they're not doing their job either.
Right.
Right.
And they swear the same oath of office to uphold and defend the Constitution and protect the people.
Do police officers actually swear that?
I believe they do.
Yeah.
I
Because
believe
I noticed that you're also a member of Oath Keepers. You want
Yes.
to talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's an organization, again, it was started by Stuart Rhodes, and it was started on the realization that there's a lot going on that should not be happening, and specifically police and military should be honoring their oath of office and not complying with orders that are unlawful or unconstitutional.
Right.
And they have a number of items specifically that a member of Oath Keepers is saying that they will not do, such as taking people's guns away during a crisis, things along that nature. But where I was going with, specifically with the question you were talking about with the gun club, is EPA regulations, again, should not be applied to private citizens or private property, period.
Right.
They don't have that constitutional authority. And environmental issues should be dealt with on a local level between the people that know what's going on.
Right.
And if somebody is filing frivolous lawsuits, they need to be brought up on charges for filing
You would
frivolous
think so,
lawsuits.
but if for some reason they keep getting away with it.
Right. Well, another aspect of the Office of the Sheriff, as I said, because it predates the Constitution and again is based in common law, one of the purviews, if you will, of the sheriff is that he can call a citizen's grand jury. And in most cases, it's referred to.
I definitely have not heard that one. Finally,
okay.
something's meeting.
Yeah.
A citizen's grand jury. What is
Citizens
that?
grand jury. Basically, it is outside of the standard court system.
Mm-hmm.
It's not part of the status quo. And the sheriff is not a dictator and does not conduct the trial, but basically can bring someone up on charges, say, for example, violation of oath of office, and bring them before citizens of the county. And the trial is held. The jury determines the facts as well as the law, and they
Right.
come up with a decision. So
And that wouldn't be jail time. That would be a way of getting somebody out of office. You mean?
whatever the citizen jurors decide is justified.
Wow.
That's the
Interesting.
power of the jury. And again, one of the other things that a lot of people are not aware of, there's a big difference between a jury trial and a trial by jury. A jury trial is what most people think of,
Yep.
where the judge presides and kind of directs what goes on and can tell the jurors what they can and can't decide on, again, sort of along the same lines as jury nullification. A trial by jury is a case that is conducted by the jury, and the judge is basically just a mediator and facilitator.
Right.
And the jurors can go out, they can do their investigation, they can look at whatever material they want, and again, all the authority is with the jury. So a citizen's grand jury is along the same lines, but again, it's sort of outside of the standard system and the status quo, if you will, and it's meant to avoid some of these issues where things just get passed on just because it's easier.
Right. Now, what would be? Has there been any? And I'm not a big believer in the necessity for precedent, but is there a precedent for it?
I don't know specifically.
Okay.
And there are constitutional scholars that know a lot more than I do that I would certainly consult before going through anything like that. But the
Yeah.
authority is there.
Okay.
Again, because the sheriff's based in common law.
Okay.
And that's a big aspect of the position.
You mentioned something that caught my ear about charging someone, bringing someone up on charges for filing frivolous lawsuits.
Sure.
You can do that? You can charge someone with that?
Well, as the sheriff, I wouldn't, but somebody could.
Really?
And certainly that's something that, again, should be looked at if these people, again, in the example that you brought, that if these people are filing frivolous lawsuits, that absolutely should be addressed.
Yeah.
And that's a violation of their rights. The owners of the gun club.
Sure.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It is too difficult to keep defending yourself. I think that's one of the problems with too many lawyers in government, is because you have these lawyers who get paid to litigate things, and you get offices in the government where you have somebody whose job is to hang around and file lawsuits. You can just keep suing people
Oh, yeah.
and taking them to
Right.
court and doing this.
And
You
absolutely,
can-
it's
you
a
can just-
tactic to just make them
Just
go away.
destroy people with,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
with just through litigation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because even if you keep losing,
It doesn't matter. You still
Right.
have to keep
Right.
defending.
exactly.
And the
Yeah.
lawyers still get paid.
And the
Yeah.
lawyer still gets paid on both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Huh.
Right.
Anyway, so now this is if that's the case, if you're running the sheriff's department as what you do believe or see as constitutional or unconstitutional, how are you going to deal with things like drug laws? Because you are going to, as part of the sheriff's department, be called to be part of drug raids and things like that. And if you don't constitutionally believe that the federal government has any law or right to arrest people for possession of marijuana,
Right.
how is your office going to deal with that?
Let me back up for 1 second. This might be a little nitpicky thing, but you referred to the sheriff's department. It's It's actually the office of the sheriff or the sheriff's office.
Right.
And the reason I bring that up is because the sheriff has no superior in the county. It's
Well,
not
they-
part of a bigger agency.
Yeah, they answer to the county commissioner in some
They
regards,
work
too.
with the county commissioner, but officially and legally, they do not answer to the commissioners.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay? They are the chief law enforcement officer of the county.
Right.
Okay? So to call it the department of the sheriff, again, that's sort of referring that it's part of a bigger umbrella.
Yeah.
And it is,
Okay.
the office is only answerable to the people.
Okay, anyway.
So, but to get back to your question, and the reason I'm saying that is, again, the sheriff is responsible to make sure that whatever happens in the county is lawful. The drug war is an absolute failure.
I agree.
It is an absolute failure. And so many times people's lives are ruined supposedly to help them because of their drug habit.
Right.
It's a failure. It doesn't work. And chasing after someone because they have a little bit of pot is not constitutional. It is not lawful.
So as sheriff,
I will not pursue it.
okay,
Good for you.
I will not pursue
I'm
it.
with you.
okay.
And people have a right to screw up their own lives.
Well, we're going to disagree on that.
I'm with you,
It's
but I
free
think
will.
Gary will disagree.
And education would be so much more helpful to try and
You're fired.
Again.
So, go ahead.
basically, again, it's such an abject failure. There's no question about it. And with, let me give you an example. Some of the federal agencies, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
The bad F.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were, a couple years ago, they were going to honor some of their agents. And they had knives commissioned as presents for them. And they wanted them inscribed with "Always think forfeiture." That's the mentality that we're
Yeah.
talking about.
No, I that's the bad F. That's different than
Okay.
local laws that are written by legislators like me who have nothing better to do than write stuff.
But the point I'm trying to make is that the forfeiture aspect
Yes.
of the drug war is so enticing that people lose sight of the fact that are they really helping the person?
Right.
Because that happens without due process, right? If I understand correctly, like they can
Forfeiture?
like
Absolutely.
they'll come in and grab property without
Absolutely.
any due process.
They
Just grab it.
That's the problem is they grab property without due process. Theoretically, they hold it until it's gone through due process before they dispose of it. But
Theoretically. Right.
how are you going to deal as sheriff also? And I'm going to lose my train of thought. Do you see my train of thought?
Got derailed.
Go on. Man. I get glaucoma, so I have to smoke like 20 joints a day, and it just, yeah. No. Anyway,
All on your way here.
all on the way here.
Yes,
yes. Woo! No, so,
But specifically, medical marijuana.
right.
I mean, it's documented that it can be helpful to some people. It can be medicinal. So why are there people trying to prevent that?
Yeah, I understand. We could argue about
Well,
that for a while. But no, I got up on the House floor. It was medical marijuana, and I spoke, and I said that as somebody with glaucoma, I want to speak to that particular aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And marijuana does control the pressure associated with glaucoma, but the fact of the matter is you have to basically stay high all the time.
Okay.
And the medication that my ophthalmologist can already provide me without being high all the time is more effective.
Okay.
I said, however, the advantage of using marijuana to control my glaucoma is if I do go blind, I won't care.
Right.
So,
Which is practical.
well, yeah, I mean, you gotta think of the
Gotta
bright
be
side.
pragmatic. And,
So I said that in front of 400 people, and this is back 10 years ago. So
Oh, wow.
I was still one of the youngest ones there.
yeah.
And you could tell half of them got it, and half of them are just like scratching it. It was awesome. Oh, I amuse me. So if you go into as your position as sheriff, how are you going to deal with court orders to have people's guns removed because of restraining orders, which are also the forfeiture of property or the taking of property without due process.
Right. Each would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But again, the sheriff is responsible to make sure that whatever action, especially governmental action, occurs is lawful.
Yeah.
And the taking of someone's property should be looked at extremely seriously. It should not be looked at lightly.
Right.
And it really, if someone is a threat, an actual threat to someone else, it might be justified. But as sheriff, I would make sure that before someone's property is taken or their rights are taken, that it is absolutely necessary and lawful.
Okay. Because the thing is, now I'm going to be devil's advocate. You've already mentioned a few instances where you would find that the laws that the legislature has put in place for the state of New Hampshire, where you might not be compliant, where you might not believe it's constitutional.
Right.
If you had a different sheriff in every county, and each sheriff saw the Constitution slightly differently. Some believe that drug laws are okay, these laws are okay. If they're going to all pick and choose what they believe is or isn't Constitution, wouldn't that be rather confusing at best for the citizenry?
It could very well be, and bottom line is, if there's constitutional authority, it should be fairly clear. It should not be that hard to determine whether a proposed action is constitutional or not. And what I would probably...
What would be the litmus test? I mean, because now let's take that to like I was going to say Promise Keepers. I went to Promise Keepers back in the
did you?
with my son back in the 90s. There's 1 million people on the Common.
I wasn't there, but I heard it was amazing.
It got like this much press.
Right.
Wow.
Why?
Really?
Oh yeah, wicked bad. National Organization of Women. I went with some guys from the church out on the off Bridge. It's not Bridge Street. It goes from Bridge Street and then it goes past 93 and it turns into another street. I forget what it's called. And there's a church on the left. But we all congregated there. We took buses in, and one of the guys was in security when we went to Promise Keepers. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of National Organization of Whiners out there. There's about a couple dozen of them protesting because it's this all-guy thing.
Right.
And it's a positive thing because this is where we
right.
disagree. I believe that the biggest problem with the drug wars isn't the drug wars; it's fatherlessness. If you look at
I don't disagree with that.
the children in the Department of Care of Youth Service, Department of Child Youth Service in New Hampshire, almost all of them are from single-parent and broken homes. Anyway, to me, that's where the issue is. So anyway, so the National Organization of Whiners, they have about a few dozen or a couple dozen of them protesting, but they're not getting any attention. Because Promise Keepers was a group of men getting together and praying and rededicating themselves to their responsibility as being a father. Which is really nothing wrong with. Most women want us to do that anyway.
Right. Who could argue with that?
You can't argue
You
with it,
wouldn't
except
think that you could argue with
right,
that.
except the
right.
National Organization of Whiners. They're up there protesting. They're not getting any attention, right?
Right.
Nobody cares because there's like 1 million guys there with their children,
Yeah.
and there's kids in the cotton picking in the crowd. Okay,
Right.
my son was there. He was like knee high to a grasshopper, and light enough to go out on a limb.
Yes.
I think.
Sure.
So-
yeah. Maybe he still is.
So they take their clothes off and run into the crowd to get attention.
Really?
And they ran into a group of Christian bikers who weren't confused by this, put their jackets and stuff like that around them, dragged them out of the thing, because there's little kids around.
Right.
You know? And
This
and
is wild. So, you sure this wasn't a dream you had? This is wild stuff.
I hadn't
Like,
heard
this,
about that
this
part
is
of it.
yeah,
Wow.
of course you didn't hear about it. Like I said, the National Propaganda Radio and
Wow.
AP freaking control what you know.
Right.
And so anyway, it was just so ridiculous. It was
wow.
It was a lot of fun though.
Yeah, it sounds
But anyway,
like a good time.
that's why I get confused when they say Oath Keepers. I'm thinking of Promise Keepers. And, anyway, sorry, I digressed again. I digress a lot.
Little digressions, all right?
Yes, digression. Anyway, Who are you again? No. So fundamentally, I'm starting to get a little bit queasy about the idea of, well, if there's some certain state police officer believes that something's unconstitutional,
Right.
it could get. I mean, in part, it's good. In particular, the Second Amendment. If there ever gets to the point where the federal government, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm get to a point where they feel that they have to confiscate everybody's guns because
Did you say if they get to that point?
everybody, I said, not.
Okay.
I mean, they have gotten
Yeah.
to that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
In particular cases. It would be great if our state police and our local police and our sheriff's department told the federal government, no. I'm sorry. I mean, Waco, Texas is a good example of that.
Yeah.
The local police should have said, get out.
Absolutely.
You know, you got nothing. You know, leave. So the guy's got some guns. Big deal. Everybody's got guns.
Right. Right.
It's Texas.
Right.
Wake up and sniff the coffee. So that would be really, really good. But if all these different agencies upheld the laws written by the legislature based on what they believe the Constitution, you don't think that could cause massive problems, if not?
Freedom and liberty can be pretty scary. And
That's why my
It's-
wife doesn't usually let me out the house. But that,
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, she's a pragmatist.
yes.
I firmly believe that public officials are not put into office to be yes men and yes women.
Right.
That they're there to use their brains.
Oh, no, I don't do that. No,
I told you, he's got strange ideas.
know.
I
It is
do.
weird.
I
Yes,
do.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
I just go up to Concord to get along and get free lunches.
Lasagna.
Lasagna.
Oh, you get free lunches too? I didn't know
Sometimes,
about
if you
that.
know, well, you have to know the right people. I get hamburgers sometimes,
Nice.
lasagna.
Yeah.
But at any rate, the sheriff, if no one else, as I said, the office is absolutely perfectly clear that the sheriff has to make sure that what goes on is lawful. Doesn't
Right.
matter where that law might be coming from. If it is infringing on somebody's rights, the sheriff is duty-bound to stop it.
To stop it. Now, it's one thing for you not to engage in. To stop it could,
Well, someone has rights.
Right, I understand that, but are you going to have 50 sheriffs there and 250 state police and kind of face off, or?
Well, I would hope it wouldn't get to that point. Let me give you an example.
That would be interesting, though.
Well,
Yeah, volleyball fight or something, Tasers at 20 paces.
yeah.
Sorry.
But no, I mean, you ask about
If you wanted a
some sheriffs
serious
actually
show,
doing
you really
this.
shouldn't have come on.
No,
it's-
this is fine. You got to keep it light. But out west, there are some sheriffs that are exercising their authority to some point. Out west, the issue is water rights, and the Bureau of Land Management comes in and they break up a dam and then tell the farmers you can't use your own water. You got to let your crops die because we say so. And there's a little minnow there that has to be protected. The
They
sheriffs.
did. Oh, I don't. I heard this. I haven't double checked this. I should double check it. But I believe George Soros did that with a bunch of land along the Mississippi. They broke the dams to try to protect some, endangered migrant turtle or something. Soros bought up the land because now it was useless because they couldn't actually control the water on the land because they couldn't grow anything.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden the dams are working again.
Really?
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, but that's what I heard. I haven't double checked that, but it wouldn't put it past me. I wouldn't put it past them.
Oh no, absolutely.
But you're right,
But so,
yeah.
so these sheriffs are actually telling the Bureau of Land Management to leave the county
Right,
and are protecting these farmers and their crops and their livelihoods
right.
because they're exercising the authority to protect these people and their rights.
So that's like that stuff. I also, I would love to see somebody who had a reasonable amount of testicular fortitude
Right.
to stand up and actually stand up against the federal government, because you're right. The federal government is
Out of control.
out of control, absolutely out of control. State governments in New Hampshire is not horrible, but it's not great.
Right. Right.
Because I was on the show quite a while ago. We were talking. I think I figured it out or found out it's like 300,000 different laws in New Hampshire, something like that.
Wow.
Just in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And so the old adage, ignorance of the law is no excuse, is not really true anymore. It really isn't. It's
Yeah.
there is no, have yet to meet anybody that knows them all anyway.
You can't.
You can't possibly
Right.
know all the laws, so therefore ignorance of the law is an excuse.
Right. However, I believe that that phrase is referring to knowledge of the Constitution, not necessarily the RSAs and regulations.
Yeah, nobody knows that either. What is,
Well. Yeah, there I go with my strange ideas again.
yeah. He's sick, twisted. So anyway, so how's it going? How's your office run for go? I know I've seen lots of signs up.
Yep.
I see in Goffstown, I see Jim Hardy's sign and
Yes.
one of your signs right next to it.
Yes.
It's kind of good.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how some of these other signs pop up wherever my sign goes. But actually, the campaign is going very well. Yesterday it was announced I got Jack Kimball's endorsement. And also someone you may or may not know, Trevor Lyman. He
No.
was the mastermind behind the original Money Bomb for Ron Paul.
Okay.
In his first run. So he's well connected as well. So
Yeah.
and I got a number of other endorsements as well. But Jack's was great, and Jack is helping me with the campaign.
Yeah.
But every time I talk to people and present these ideas, most people don't realize the authority of the sheriff, so it's news to them.
Yeah.
But
I've learned a lot here today. Absolutely.
But, pretty much everybody's very receptive, and
I've taken in enough so that I have plenty to forget tomorrow.
okay.
Yeah, good, good. Well, you don't want to run out.
No,
No.
no, that's why I learn something new every day.
Constantly replacing the. Yeah. You have to replenish.
My mind is
You only have so much room, right?
no, really, no. I don't have that much room. But yeah, so that's going good. You what other anything else you'd like to say before we got only about 3 minutes? So
Well, just a shameless plug. We're having our first big fundraiser on the 8th.
fundraiser,
A big
fundraiser. It's
Yes.
going to be a fun,
Yes, capital F, capital U, capital N. Fun.
right? Fun.
And we're doing a Monte Carlo night at the Crown Plaza in Nashua.
Oh, so you're not. Oh, so if you're a sheriff and somebody has some like illegal gaming on the side, you're okay
Illegal
with
or
it?
unlawful?
Illegal. In other words, they're going to see Matt and I start like our poker thing. You're going to be okay with that?
Legal or unlawful?
And
Big
what-
difference.
Yeah, one of them.
One is constitutional and one may not be.
Wicked constitutional.
Yeah.
Strange
ideas.
Yes, yes, that,
Our gambling.
yes. That'll make it. That'll make it all right, right?
It'd be perfect.
Yes.
We're going to make some money.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so.
Well,
so
this,
anyway,
this is strictly not changing money, so you can't win anything. Just help with the campaign.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if we help with the campaign, we can open up. Never mind. We'll talk
Don't
about
go
this
there.
after.
Yes,
after.
that's for after
We
the
probably
show.
should
Yes.
talk about it afterwards.
Right, yeah.
But I hope people will go to my website. And
Yep,
it's,
what is that?
Zaboforsheriff.com. It's SZABO, and Sheriff has 2 F's, 1 R. And check out the information. And
I learned that today too.
Really?
Yeah.
About how to spell sheriff?
Yeah, I had to. 'Cause
Yeah.
I was doing Google searching to find out stuff.
Oh,
I actually do look into stuff a little bit.
that's good. That's good. Whenever I Google sheriff, I come up with She's the Sheriff. Remember that Suzanne Summers show? Lasted about half a season. They canceled it. You guys don't even remember, do you? That's how quick it came and went. That's a real show. I'm not kidding.
Right.
She's the Sheriff.
She's a
I haven't
sheriff.
heard that
Yeah,
one.
Suzanne Summers. Yeah.
Now, what,
It was after Three's Company. Obviously, it was supposed to be her big comeback, and it fizzled pretty quick.
isn't she the one where her kid had somebody got a picture of her or something? Never mind. Anyway, I was digressing again.
Again, yeah.
So anyway, it's zaboforsheriff.com. Okay. And you get the fundraiser when?
August 8th.
August
next Wednesday.
8th, next Wednesday, and it's down at the Crown Plaza.
Crown Plaza in Nashua. Right.
And is there anything else you would like to?
Just that people realize that there's a public official out there that actually can help them and
Yep.
protect them, and that's what the sheriff is supposed to do.
Okay.
And again, I hope they look into it and find out more.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Frank.
Sure.
We'll see everybody next week. Matt, you're all right. I unfired you.
Thank you, Gary.
sir.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Bye, everybody.